When people think about Bob Dole, they usually remember him as a war hero, a senator from Kansas, or the man who ran for president in 1996. What most people do not know is that Dole also fought one of the biggest battles in American media history. This fight was not about winning an election or passing a farm bill. It was about who controlled the very airwaves that carried television into millions of homes. In the 1990s, the government was preparing to move from old analog TV signals to new digital signals. This meant a huge part of the public airwaves, worth billions of dollars, was about to be given away to big television networks for free. Dole saw this as unfair. He believed the airwaves belonged to the American people, not just a few wealthy corporations. His fight was complicated and often ignored by the press, but it shaped how the television industry works today. Even though his effort was not fully successful during his lifetime, it forced the country to see broadcasting as a public resource. Without his push, the later auctions that raised billions for the government may never have happened. To understand why Bob Dole cared so much about fairness, we need to look back at his early life. He was born in 1923 in Russell, Kansas, a small town that suffered badly during the Great Depression. His family did not have much money. They lived in a small house, and everyone had to work hard just to get by. As a boy, Bob saw neighbors lose their farms and businesses. These struggles left a strong mark on him. He learned early on what it meant to live without privilege, and this shaped his sense of justice. There is even a story from his youth where he once stole a bicycle and felt guilty for years afterward. This simple memory showed how deeply he cared about doing what was right. For Bob, rules and fairness were not just words, they were part of his character. Later, when he saw giant TV companies trying to take billions in free airwaves, that old sense of fairness returned. He remembered the hard times of his youth and believed regular people deserved their share of public resources. Bob Dole's sense of duty became even stronger during World War II. At the age of 21, he joined the army and was sent to fight in Italy. In 1945, during a battle, he was hit by enemy fire and nearly died. The injury destroyed his shoulder and damaged his spine, leaving him paralyzed from the neck down. For months, he could not move, eat, or even sit up without help. Doctors told him he might never walk again. But Dole refused to give up. He went through years of painful recovery, teaching himself how to use his left hand because his right arm was permanently disabled. He would carry a pen in his right hand for the rest of his life, not to write, but to hide his injury from others. This experience gave him incredible strength and discipline. More importantly, it made him deeply empathetic toward others who faced hardship. His recovery showed him that people could rebuild their lives after tragedy. This belief carried into his politics. He often supported programs for disabled veterans, food aid for the poor, and laws that gave ordinary Americans a fair chance. His war wounds were not just scars on his body. They shaped his values forever. When most people think of Bob Dole, they imagine the Kansas senator who served in Congress for decades, the Republican leader who ran for president, or the decorated war hero who survived near death on a battlefield in Italy. But one of the most important fights of his career is rarely mentioned. It was not about winning votes or passing farm bills. Instead, it was about something that touched every American household: television. In the 1990s, the United States was preparing to move from old analog TV signals to new digital technology. This shift created a major opportunity because the old frequencies, known as spectrum, were worth billions of dollars. The government had a choice: either auction these airwaves to benefit taxpayers or give them away to big TV networks. To Dole, the answer was simple. The airwaves belonged to the American people, not corporations. Yet many powerful forces were against him. Lobbyists, media giants, and even fellow lawmakers wanted to quietly hand over the spectrum for free. Bob Dole stood almost alone, warning that this would be one of the biggest corporate giveaways in history. While he did not fully stop the giveaway at the time, his battle forced the country to see spectrum as public property. Years later, auctions of digital airwaves would bring in tens of billions for the government. Without Dole's fight, those auctions might never have happened. and the TV industry would look very different today. Bob Dole's passion for fairness can be traced back to his childhood. He was born in 1923 in Russell, Kansas, a small town hit hard by the Great Depression. Life was tough for his family. His father worked at a creamery, and his mother stitched clothes to save money. Everyone in the house learned to make do with very little. Sometimes, they even had to rent out parts of their home just to afford basic needs. As a boy, Bob watched friends and neighbors lose their farms and jobs. He understood what it meant to struggle and live without privilege. These early lessons gave him a strong sense of justice. There's even a well-known story about young Bob stealing a bicycle when he was a kid. The guilt of that small act stayed with him for years, and he would bring it up later in life to show how deeply he cared about right and wrong. That small-town Kansas upbringing made him believe that public resources, whether they were farms, schools, or even TV airwaves, should benefit ordinary people. So when he saw giant television companies trying to take billions in spectrum for free, his instincts told him it was unfair. The boy who once felt guilty about a stolen bike had grown into a man who could not ignore a stolen fortune from taxpayers. Moral toughness was strengthened. By his time in World War II, at the age of 21, he joined the US Army and was sent to fight in Italy. In April 1945, near the end of the war, he was leading a group of soldiers on a mission when gunfire tore into his body. His shoulder was destroyed, his spine was damaged, and he lay on the battlefield unable to move. For hours, he drifted in and out of consciousness, certain he would die. He was carried to a military hospital, where doctors told him he might never walk again. His recovery took years. At first, he could not feed himself, comb his hair, or even sit up. Friends and neighbors back in Kansas raised money in cigar boxes to help pay for his care. Slowly, through grit and endless therapy, he learned to move again. His right arm never healed, so he taught himself to use his left hand. For the rest of his life, he carried a pen in his useless right hand to make the injury less noticeable. This near-death experience gave Dole deep empathy for people with disabilities. It also made him tough. He understood pain, loss, and perseverance in a way few politicians could. This resilience later shaped his policies, supporting food stamps, disability rights, and veteran benefits. It also gave him the courage to take on powerful industries like television, because he was not afraid of a difficult fight. After recovering, Bob Dole studied law and entered politics. He started small, winning a seat in the Kansas state legislature before moving to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1960 and later the Senate in 1968. He quickly earned a reputation as a tough fighter, but also as someone who knew how to compromise. Dole was deeply conservative on many issues, but he also believed in practical solutions. He helped pass bills that expanded food programs for the poor and supported Social Security. During the Watergate scandal, he defended President Nixon at first, but eventually recognized the need for accountability. He worked with Democrats when it was necessary, even if it angered some in his own party. This ability to balance partisanship with pragmatism gave him credibility. By the 1980s and 1990s, he was one of the most powerful figures in Washington, serving as Senate Majority Leader. That role gave him the platform to take on big issues, including one that most people would have ignored: the ownership of the nation's television spectrum. While others were distracted by culture wars and elections, Dole focused on a fight that seemed invisible but would shape the future of American media. In the 1990s, the U.S. government was preparing to transition television from analog to digital broadcasting. This change freed up an enormous amount of valuable airwaves. These airwaves, known as spectrum, were not just empty space. They were the foundation for new technology, from high-definition TV to future wireless internet. The estimated value was staggering, with some saying it could be worth $70 billion or more. But instead of auctioning these frequencies to the highest bidder, lawmakers and lobbyists pushed to give them away to the big TV networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox, for free. Dole was outraged. To him, this was a massive theft from taxpayers. He argued that if ordinary people had to pay for cable or for phone service, Corporations should also pay for access to public airwaves. Yet the networks had deep influence in Washington, and many politicians preferred not to challenge them. For years, Dole stood almost alone, calling out the giveaway. He used the Senate floor to demand auctions, warning that the public's property was being stolen. Though the networks won the initial fight, Dole's persistence planted the seed for change. His argument later inspired spectrum auctions that brought in billions for the U.S. Treasury. In the end, his lonely stand against corporate power reshaped how America treated its airwaves. At first, the fight over spectrum might sound technical or boring, but for Bob Dole, it was about fairness for everyday Americans. He understood that the airwaves were like national parks, resources owned by the public. Giving them away for free to wealthy corporations meant robbing the people. Imagine if the government handed over Yellowstone or the Grand Canyon to a private company without payment. The outrage would be immediate. Yet with television spectrum, the theft was hidden, buried under technical language and legal jargon. Dole wanted to shine a light on it. By demanding auctions, he hoped the billions raised could fund schools, healthcare, or reduce the national debt. His stand was not about attacking television, but about protecting taxpayers. Even though he did not stop the initial giveaway, his pressure made lawmakers think twice in the future. Thanks to him, spectrum auctions later became the norm, raising tens of billions of dollars that went back to the public instead of corporate pockets. Ordinary viewers never realized it, but every time they turned on a digital channel or used wireless internet, they were living in the shadow of Dole's forgotten fight. Despite his strength, Bob Dole's career was not without setbacks. His presidential runs in 1980, 1988, and finally 1996 all ended in failure. He was respected but never fully loved by voters, who sometimes saw him as too serious or too harsh. In 1996, he lost to Bill Clinton in a landslide. Earlier in his career, he faced criticism for being too close to lobbyists. Some questioned his ties to industries and donors, even as he fought against media companies. Personally, he also endured struggles. His first marriage ended in divorce, and critics accused him of being distant. Yet through all the losses and attacks, he kept going. His resilience came from the same place that helped him survive war and paralysis. He believed in service above personal comfort. Even after losing the presidency, he stayed active in public life, raising money for veterans and appearing on TV shows to keep issues alive. For many, he became a symbol of persistence, someone who might lose battles but never stopped fighting. This image made his battle against the TV networks even more powerful. It was another case of him standing up, when it would have been easier to stay quiet in his later years. Bob Dole became something of an elder statesman. He appeared in commercials, including a famous ad for a medical product, showing he could laugh at himself. He also worked on charitable causes, particularly for disabled veterans, drawing from his own experience. In 2018, when President George H.W. Bush died, a 95-year-old Bob Dole, unable to stand on his own, was lifted from his wheelchair to salute his old friend one last time. The image moved the nation. Even in his final years, he carried the same values: respect, service, and duty. When he passed away in 2021, tributes poured in from both Democrats and Republicans.